Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filter and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial tech entrepreneur, a guy who's launched 30 companies. I've failed at 20 of those, but I've scaled 10 to success. And that roller coaster of a ride is talked about in my book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is where I teach you how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software always played a key defining role in every win that I have had. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We're a nearshore software development company helping existing engineering teams scale with proven talent. And today I am joined by Jack Kearney from Turnkey, this is going to be a fun one. It's a great crypto infrastructure platform. Jack is an engineer turned entrepreneur, CTO, and founder. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Jack, if you would, take a few minutes, walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
All right. Let's see here. So I think my career, let's say, started or the most important thing in my career was when I was in 2011, in between my junior and senior year of college. Heard about this thing called Bitcoin, which was at the time a really nascent, weird technology. There's probably only a couple thousand people in the world who were really tinkering with it. And I had a lot of time on my hands and was studying math and economics in college. So it was kind of, right at the intersection of things that I was interested in studying and thinking about. So immediately just went right down the rabbit hole and started playing with Bitcoin, running full nodes, sending money around, kind of getting a feel for it. And just really quickly got the bug. I was just like immediately taken away by this technology and a lot of the really interesting concepts that borderless internet money could. And so I got into Bitcoin then, but didn't really dive into it professionally until 2016, partially just because there weren't that many companies at the time that were doing anything with Bitcoin at scale. And so I waited for a couple of years and then joined Coinbase. At the time, I think I was around engineer 30 or something. The company was 50, 60 people, something like that. And I joined the infrastructure and security team. It was just one kind of combined team. We did a lot of cool stuff. Then I kind of was one of the first people working on Coinbase custody, partially because one of my closest childhood friends was running a crypto hedge fund at the time. So I knew kind of the perils and issues around crypto custody and talked to him a lot about his trouble storing assets. And so I dove in.
Explain crypto custody.
Yeah, okay. Crypto custody is just, crypto is, it's kind of a crazy concept. There's a blockchain and you're going to communicate with this decentralized ledger, which is, running on a bunch of different computers around the world. And the way you actually make a change, so you send crypto around, is you have to sign a transaction. So digitally sign a transaction using a private key. And so protecting those private keys is essentially equivalent to storing that crypto. And protecting the private keys, then if you want to make sure that the funds don't get stolen, you have to protect that private key really, really well. And so a lot of crypto custody just goes into the security of the private keys associated with the funds that are tied to those private keys, basically.
Okay, gotcha. So certainly knew all that, but wasn't familiar with the term crypto custody. So thanks for that explanation.
Yeah. And custody also is kind of a, sort of trigger word when it comes to regulation. So there's, if you are kind of like a fund or hit a certain size as a fund or other kind of regulated financial institution, you typically have to store your funds with what's called a qualified custodian, which is, kind of somebody who has a particular registration.
Sure.
So I was working on Coinbase custody, eventually moved over to Polychain Capital, which is a really big crypto venture firm and hedge fund, and did a lot of custody work there. So made sure that Polychain was kind of securely storing its assets. And through that process, realized that there was a kind of gap in the market on programmable, great tools to store crypto keys, and ended up building Turnkey, which is basically an API-driven crypto storage solution.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, tell us more about Turnkey. And it's kind of crazy. You're a young guy. You've had this great success. Bitcoin, isn't that old. So it's kind of a nice area where a young guy can have a very high level of knowledge because it hasn't been around for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of new technology, that's for sure. I mean, what's cool is that it's a lot of new technology, but it's in some ways like the combination of a lot of technology that is pretty old. Like a lot of the cryptography that goes into some of the most important cryptocurrency networks around, has been around for decades. A lot of technology that Turnkey uses under the hood has been around for decades, but it's just kind of this recombination, which is really interesting and leads to some super novel new technologies.
Awesome. So tell us more about Turnkey and what you're doing.
Yeah, so Turnkey is, like I said, it's basically a developer tool. So there's all sorts of different developers out there who want to build products on top of on top of crypto networks. So maybe they want to move crypto around from point A to point B. Maybe they want to build a front end where their users are going to store crypto and interact with DeFi protocols and things like that. And Turnkey really just wants to be a platform that allows all of those entrepreneurs to get off the ground and able to build their product or what really differentiates their product a lot more easily. Kind of a weird analogy here, but I think it's important sometimes, is we like to think of ourselves in kind of a similar position to what like AWS was when it came to the like transition from on-prem services to cloud services. You guys recognize that, hey, this is a really like undifferentiated piece of work if you're hiring out a whole ops team to go rack servers and do all this internal networking constantly just to get your kind of web API off the ground. And eventually they said, why don't we just do this, do it really well, do it really securely for everyone, and then if you're a sort of entrepreneur, you can just use the underlying technology that AWS provides and build the thing that differentiates your business. Kind of focus your energy on that. And so Turnkey's kind of doing the same thing. We're saying a lot of people who are going to build products in crypto need to deal with crypto key management. They need to store these private keys successfully on behalf of their customers. But doing that is kind of the same kind of work every time. And so we're trying to do that really well, do it the most secure way we possibly can, and then let the entrepreneurs who are building on Turnkey just get back to making what's differentiated for their product, basically.
Gotcha. And so you started this company like 4 years ago?
Yeah, 2022, early 2022.
And you have a co-founder as well?
Yep. So my co-founder.
How did you guys meet and pull together this venture?
Yeah, so we met actually at Coinbase. I was one of the first engineers working on Coinbase custody. He was the first PM, so product manager working on Coinbase custody. And we just met kind of scaling this thing from essentially $0 to around $100 billion of assets in the system. And specifically, we were kind of tasked with going out and trying to do this new thing on top of Coinbase custody. And he was kind of the business guy. I was kind of the engineering guy. It was a net new thing in Coinbase. And we were kind of, attacking this problem from two different angles. Just realized we liked working together a lot. So eventually when we were both, kind of thinking about doing something new, we got together and just started playing around with ideas, and Turnkey kind of popped out of it.
Gotcha. And so is there anything out there like Turnkey that, what competitors do you have for the type of infrastructure, this verifiable infrastructure to build on top of from a crypto perspective?
Yeah, I think there's competitors we have who do bits and pieces of what we do. There's Fireblocks is a big competitor in the space. They're kind of you can use it as like an API driven crypto storage and asset movement platform. I think there's another company called Privy, which is kind of somewhat similar to us in some ways. No one's quite doing the verifiable thing, which is really unique about Turnkey stack, and I think really differentiates us on like a technical level. But yeah, people, there's a variety of people who are kind of dabbling around this sort of style of product.
And you guys have been able to round up a pretty powerful investor base. So you've had a few, I think you just completed your Series B round a couple months ago for 30 million with some really big name investors. It sounds like you guys are catching a lot of attention.
Definitely. Yeah. We got really lucky. I think, from day one, our seed round was led by Sequoia Capital, who's, obviously just an incredible name in the space. Alfred Lin, who's kind of this fabled investor, led our seed round, and he's been super, super helpful in getting things off the ground. And then, ever along the way, we've just had great investors who kind of want to, help get us to the next stage. So that's been great.
So as a guy who, got into Bitcoin, grew up as an engineer, was this your first time founding a company and raising money?
Yeah, first time, I'd say founding a real company. Definitely first time raising money. I had a sort of like funny venture in college, which actually led me sort of to programming to begin with. But that was, just a little college business.
Gotcha. Well, Tell us about some current projects you're working on, some cutting edge stuff. And obviously, you can't disclose certain things, but give us enough to give us a feel for some cool projects you guys got going on.
For sure, yeah. Um, so I like to be super transparent, actually. Like, I like to talk about what we're doing, kind of at every level of the stack, mostly because I think, there's this phrase like security shouldn't be through obscurity. And I think I really try and hold true to that. I want to put everything out there and talk openly about our architecture, because I think that's shining light on where you might have flaws is the best way to sort of illustrate and improve your product.
Well, that takes a lot of maturity to have that attitude out there, and I agree with it wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So one of the like really unique things about Turnkey is we're built on this technology called secure enclaves. Specifically, we use a product in AWS called micro enclaves, which are like really constrained and auditable in some cases computers. So basically, this is getting a little into the nitty gritty, but basically at boot, you can watch kind of exactly what is booting up into the machine and then have Amazon's key infrastructure basically sign that. So they sign what's called an attestation of the boot process. So you can know exactly what is running there.
Okay.
And Turnkey has kind of invested really, really heavily into the ability to be able to audit like precisely what particular piece of source code is running in each of these secure enclaves at any point in time. So we can kind of have a machine that's running in our backend and then say, we can prove basically pretty completely that this particular commit or this particular version of this application is running there. So that's really cool. And it's been something we've had internally forever.
And I mean, are those just bare metal servers in the AWS cloud that are dedicated, or are they instances?
They are technically instances. So every EC2 instance is built on the stack called the Nitro stack. And a lot of those instances, you can just carve out basically a certain amount of CPU and like full physical cores and memory and say, this thing over here now, what we carved out is a Nitro enclave. And then Amazon provides this additional service on top to kind of attest to what happened when you carved out that, those resources for that.
I didn't know if that additional attestation required it to be like a dedicated server.
Yeah, it doesn't in this case, but it's I think there's definitely added benefits to not going multi-tenant here. It's super sensitive stuff, so
Sure,
makes sense too. But we so it's this whole attestation thing has been possible in our system for a long time, but now we're actually trying to weave it into the full API. So essentially, what we want to do is on every single API request that ends up hitting one or more of the enclaves in our backend, we want to be able to essentially prove in the API response that that request was actually served by a particular version of the enclaves. So you can kind of have this, sometimes there's this concept called key provenance, which is like, if I'm going to use a key, how do I know where this key has been throughout its life cycle? And what we want to be able to say is like, we have definitive proof to you that this key was generated in this enclave and it's never left this enclave. And, every time you interacted with it, we can prove to you that you interacted with it by a particular version of our application and stuff like that. So it's kind of a cutting edge new thing, but we think it's a pretty important tool to be able to like fully be able to verify what's happening in our backend.
Gotcha. All right. So dummy this down for me. In the crypto world, and with blockchain, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a lot of instances of things being hacked, but it's always been my belief that once and I'm not using the right crypto terminology here, so keep me honest, but once you are plugging your wallet in to essentially take out or put in or trade your crypto, how is that still as secure during that point? To me, that's where I think a breach could occur, but I am not a crypto blockchain expert.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. It's if you're moving the wallet around, if you're moving the actual key around, that exposes it to tons of different kind of software that could ultimately be doing something sketchy with it.
Right.
And so what Turnkey's philosophy is like, let's make sure whenever, like, the only place this key is stored is in a really locked down location, way in Turnkey's backend. And then if you want to use it, you can kind of call our API and say, hey, I want to use it. And that ensures that the key can't really be exfiltrated, or it's very, very difficult for it to be exfiltrated. Another really cool thing that Turnkey does is we have a whole system we call it our policy engine. So essentially you can write policies which control the conditions upon which a key will be used to sign something. So for instance, I could set up a policy that says Steve and Jack both have to approve a transaction before that transaction will be signed by Turnkey.
Okay.
And so that gives you, as a developer, again, you're using Turnkey, within your product. It gives you a lot of control to say, like, we're gonna lock this down, and just one person's account being compromised won't lead to a compromise of the funds, tied to this key. It would have to be both Jack and Steve being compromised in order to access those funds.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, tell us about your software engineering team that's pulling all this great stuff off.
They are incredible. I think startups, in my mind, are, ideas are cheap, let's say, and execution is incredibly hard. So I think the whole concept of Turnkey wouldn't be possible without having an incredible team behind us. They're mostly senior engineers. So we definitely have a sort of senior lean engineering team. A lot of people who are in crypto or have been in crypto for a really long time. A number of people kind of from the core founding team of Turnkey, or folks that Bryce, my co-founder, and I worked directly with at Coinbase Custody. So these are people we brought over who had just like direct experience working on key management problems and a lot of like product problems that come along with dealing with keys at scale. And so that was super helpful in getting the kind of core product off the ground, is just having that much context. But in general, I look for people who are super autonomous, super kind of high agency, and able just to drive forward initiatives on their own. I think we have a saying within Turnkey that we're looking for high context, low ego people. So people who are just really conscious of or have a lot of context over what they're building, but who aren't going to be, the brilliant jerk in the room. I think that's really, really critical to making a successful engineering culture.
And are you guys a fully remote company, hybrid?
Yeah, we're kind of hybrid. We have an office in New York, and so probably about half the team is based in New York. Definitely recognize, though, that talent is everywhere in the world, and we want to be, open to bringing in people who are excellent wherever they are in the world. What we try and do is bring people together in person, at least pretty frequently, to our office in New York. I personally think there's nothing quite like high fidelity, low latency conversations that you get in person. That's just like, you're not gonna be able to really tackle super complicated problems if you can't occasionally see someone, in a room and stand in front of a whiteboard with them.
I agree. And I'll tell you what, I haven't figured out a virtual whiteboard that comes anywhere near being in the room with people and using a physical whiteboard to, as you said, to solve complex issues.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So we have probably 6 people who aren't typically in New York here this week. And we're just hacking on a bunch of fun problems.
So for you, how has the journey been from you going from an engineer to CTO? And certainly you guys would be a great niche, high profile venture, attracting great capital. How is that journey for you between being an engineer and being a CTO and co-founder?
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different job than when I was an engineer, through and through. I think there's a lot of different ways you could be a CTO, and I think a lot of different people approach the CTO job in really different ways. I have erred on the side of, and I think speaks to how great the engineering team is. I've just felt like I don't have to necessarily be super technical in my day-to-day role. So I haven't been coding for quite a while now, day-to-day. That's been a hard transition just because like doing technical work is super fun. And that's why we all got into this stuff. It's really enjoyable to be an engineer, and I definitely miss it in a lot of ways. But I think realistically, I'm just able to be way more effective by working kind of with people instead of with code these days. So I miss it, but I think it's kind of a transition that needed to happen at some point.
Gotcha. So, and certainly in the high security conscious environment you're in, and pre-show we were talking about this, but so you have not integrated AI into your engineering operations yet because of the concern around security. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I mean, we've integrated it in some pretty specific areas. So we've integrated it in the like less security sensitive locations in Turnkey, but within kind of our core, very, very security sensitive places, I've been a bit of a Luddite here and said like I want to tread with caution.
Mm-hmm.
we have a huge emphasis on like code review, and we want to make sure that every time we're pushing, some very sensitive changes into production, that more than one engineer basically has had a chance to review it and thoroughly audit what's happening. And I think, I just have this fear that as we, accelerate, which inevitably will happen if you're using AI tools, you're just going to start throwing in like way, way, way more code. And the level of code review that's going to go into that is going to drop significantly. And my concern is as the level of code review drops significantly, bugs get introduced, very sensitive things or very security critical things could happen. So this is kind of controversial. I saw Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, tweeted something out yesterday that I think 40% of all new lines of code at Coinbase are written by AI these days. That's a pretty dramatic, crazy figure in my mind. And so, it's inevitable to me that we're going to have to do something here. But just historically, I've been very I guess just proceeded with caution.
Gotcha. Well, you're in such a unique niche, high security space that I think it's definitely a hard trade-off of are AI tools ready from a coding, and your business is done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a really, really security sensitive product we're building, and you just can't really cut corners.
So what's the biggest challenge you're facing right now?
I mean, we're scaling a lot, and I think that's awesome, and a huge testament to all the great work we've done. Definitely, um, that's super motivating in a lot of ways. But I think it comes with a ton of challenges as well. So very complicated scaling questions pop out as you start hitting a certain scale, and we're definitely starting to deal with some of those. We're also scaling the team a lot. So the team has gone. We're only about, let's say, 25 approaching 30 engineers right now, but still it's a pretty, to me, it's like been a really big change to go from like 10 engineers or 12 engineers to 30. Just the way you work together changes a lot. And I think trying to maintain a really high bar of talent when you're trying to grow quickly, and a great engineering culture as you're growing really quickly has been really tricky. I think we've done a great job at it, but I'm really mindful of not wanting to grow too quickly and kind of compromise on the level of talent we have in the company, and how enjoyable it is to work at a company like Turnkey. So I'm really mindful of that stuff. There's all kinds of technical questions that I could dive into, but I don't necessarily have time to get into all of those.
No, and that's a fair point. As a co-founder and CTO, that balance of maintaining the culture and the productivity of the team as you scale and go from maybe one or two squads to a bunch of them, and those are definitely challenges to deal with, that as you get bigger and bigger become more and more complex, to say the least. What's a brutal lesson you've learned now that you wish you would have known 3, 4, or 5 years ago?
I would say, you can probably tell by this conversation, I'm super interested in a lot of the technology we're working on, and I think it's really tempting. There's a phrase I really like, nerd snipe, which is if you're somebody who's into technology, it's easy to kind of just get sidetracked by exploring the technology and kind of forgetting why you're using the technology to begin with. So I think to me, it's you got to keep in mind that you're ultimately building a business here. And it's important to prioritize the go-to-market motion and the product you're building, the customers you have, as much as it is to prioritize the technology itself. And ultimately, the way you get to do new cool things with technology is by kind of building this flywheel of a business to continue reinvesting in the technology you're building.
So what, from your vantage point here, Jack, what's the next wave of crypto? What do you see coming around the corner that most who aren't experts from a crypto and blockchain perspective, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see some very, very significant players in the fintech space and traditional financial space finally coming into the scene. The stablecoin market is just booming, basically. So Stripe, the fintech, card processor originally, but giant fintech company, has been allocating a bunch of money in terms of acquisitions to crypto companies. They've kind of planted their flag and saying stablecoins are coming. And I think a lot of other people are following suit. There's this massive new layer one stablecoin company called Tempo, which is sort of a Stripe adjacent company that's launching. I just think it's the time is finally here for real world financial use cases to come on chain and use stablecoins. Payments companies and fintech companies are really adopting this en masse.
When, as far as paying with Bitcoin and normal transactions, as easy as a credit card, how far in the future do you think that is?
I don't think you're ever going to pay with Bitcoin necessarily, but I think you'll find yourself paying with stablecoins and not even realize you are. So I think we're going to see all kinds of consumer applications that look and feel like Cash App or Venmo or things like that, and show a dollar balance in the app. And then when you're transacting under the hood, it's actually transacting in stablecoins. I think it's not something that'll necessarily be like obvious that you're using crypto or not. It's just going to kind of hopefully like be seamlessly integrated into a lot of user experiences.
Gotcha. Interesting. What advice do you have for engineers out there who dream of the path you've gone through?
I
And
think
you've just begun, by the way.
yeah, I haven't done it yet. I would say don't force the idea. I think it's really tempting to sort of say, hey, I want to go and start a company and I want to raise venture capital and form a team to attack a problem. And it's really exciting to go off and do that, but it's also a long-term thing, right? It's a big investment. You're locked in for years. And so you really have to be passionate about the thing you're doing. And ideally it's something that you have a particular unique advantage or skill set in. And I think all too often I see people kind of, scrambling for ideas and throwing things against the wall and maybe it works and maybe they're good at it, or maybe it's, something that a couple of years from now they'll be totally bored with. And so I'd say like be patient and make sure the thing you're really going off to do is something that is near and dear to you and you can see yourself doing long term.
Awesome. Great advice. Jack, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. Excited to see, and I know you're saying you're still on your journey, seeing where it's going to go. To put it in perspective, going from a guy who started looking into Bitcoin and crypto in college to being a co-founder of a company with huge investors and over 30 million raised, you're well on your way, my friend. Great job, great information. Thanks for sharing that and everything you're doing with the company, and excited to see where you guys take Turnkey next.
Thanks so much.
Final end words or advice you'd like to give for listeners out there?
No, I mean, I think feel free to check us out at turnkey.com. We have great documentation. Oh, actually, one thing I'd say is we go over a ton of detail in our white paper, which you can access at whitepaper.turnkey.com. It's a very detailed sort of perspective on the technology we've built. So take a look at it. Get in touch with me if you want to, chat about anything related to Turnkey.
All right, Jack, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you did enjoy it, well, I'm going to get with Jack. We're going to hack into your company systems and make sure your competitors get all your info. I'm just kidding. Everyone, remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
Thanks.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.